All right. Well, happy 2026, everyone. For those of you who woke up on Christmas or New Year's thinking, wow, I can't wait to listen to the next Independent Voter podcast, and we didn't have a new episode, we're sorry. We took a couple weeks off to be with our families. But I'm back here with Cara and Sean Griffiths. How was your guys' holiday?
So mine was great. My kid's home from college. It was really fun. They're still here actually. In college, you get to take a whole month off, which is pretty nice. But yeah, we had it was really good to be together and cozy at home. It snowed, it's freezing here in Maine. So, I definitely am longing for warmer climes at some point. But thanks for asking. What about you, Sean? It's nice to see you, Sean Griffiths.
Yeah, it was fine. Spent time with family, a couple weeks. Winters here also they can be kind of rough. Right now we'll have consecutive days of gray sky, so it gets a little depressing around this time of year here
You
in
guys
Chicago. But
to remind you, Cara's on the east, Sean's right in the middle, and I'm on the west. So we're kind of covering the states here.
yeah,
And what are you sporting? What is that jacket that you're sporting today, Chad Peace?
For those that are watching, I am wearing a Killer Tomatoes jacket. You want to check out the back here. We're coming back with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. So some people may not know that my father was one of the original producers of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. After a long hiatus, there were 4 movies. I've had the blessing of being able to do some of the post-production and the executive production of we're calling Killer Tomatoes Organic Intelligence. In February, we're actually having a pre-screening because it's a very San Diego-centric movie. We're having a pre-screening in partnership with the Midway to also raise funds for the Midway Veterans Foundation. And I'm actually wearing the jacket because I'm heading up north to meet with some of the folks from the tomato canning world. Who knows? Maybe we'll be able to do a little marketing gigs together. But that's the story.
Product placement.
That's the story behind my crazy jacket.
Love it. Did you have a good Christmas?
I did. My 2 and 4-year-old had a great Christmas, and I think my wife did. She maintained her sanity with the kids being home for 2 weeks in a row. God bless her. I don't know how she does it every day, but we had a great time, and they're at a very cool age because they're old enough now that they definitely have their own personalities and attitudes, and they're talking in 2 different languages. And
So did you have to assemble any toys or
I
any
did
complicated
a dollhouse.
things?
I put together a dollhouse, and
There you go.
I was very proud of my workmanship. So
Good for you.
it was a good
for
sized
you.
dollhouse too.
Dollhouses aren't easy.
No, there's a lot of parts.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
So
Oh, so you guys might hear that other voice in the background. That's Ethan. He's
Yeah.
one of our producers.
he's kind of just our soothsayer in the background because he just
That's
makes
good.
you feel calm every time.
Yeah, I'll
he
try
talks.
and calm you guys down after we get all the banter between Cara and Chad on here. We know they can get a bit aggressive.
He's also the producer of all these viral social posts that have been going on lately.
We got it. We got to get attention somehow, right? So
That's
that's
so
the goal.
cool, Ethan. Like it's been, what is it, 5 million views on our Facebook page in the last 30 days, which is just extraordinary. Like we're really engaging and people are writing, like they're really expressing themselves, which,
No kidding.
for better
no
or for
kidding.
worse, there's a lot of full expression
Which
happening.
in this year too, I mean, we're going to continue to be coming out, as we told a lot of you folks, we're coming back with IVN. We're going to be releasing new features, doing more how it really works. And really, any of you who listen, who remember when we really got started 12 years ago and stuff and did a lot more of inviting folks to post on IVN and be involved, is that we're going to have a lot more of that this year. We're really excited about 2026.
Absolutely. Big year.
So today we're going to cover some significant news coming out of Minnesota, where the governor, Tim Walz, decided that he's going to drop out and not run for re-election. It's very rare that a politician gives up power, but it happened here. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about a lot of things that happen sort of under the radar when big events are going on in the news, like Venezuela and the Epstein files. There's been this change at the United States Postal Service that is really important when it comes to when your mail gets postmarked. And we're also going to talk about California voter ID ballot initiative and what's going on with that. They've collected 1 million signatures, and a little bit about Alaska, and a little bit about some of the posts that have gone viral on Facebook at Independent Voter News. So we had some big political news. Want to get into it, guys?
Yeah, go for it, Cara.
So we've got Tim Walz. He was the Democratic candidate for vice president in 2024 in the election that Donald Trump ultimately won. He is the 2-term governor of Minnesota, and he was going to run for a 3rd term. He announced 4 months ago that he was going to do that. And then lo and behold, this week he decided that he's not going to run. He's dropping out. So this leaves this wide open seat in Minnesota. You know, Minnesota is super interesting because independents have won the governor's race there before. Super famous campaign in 1998 for Jesse Ventura. But also Minnesota, you know, there's a lot going on there. They're really suffering, I would say, politically. They had their former Speaker of the House was assassinated last year, Melissa Horford. And so anyway, I was thinking and wrote an article this week is like, could an independent step into this race and maybe bring about some healing in Minnesota? Or is it going to sort of just continue down this scorched earth path? Sean, what do you think?
Jesse Ventura was a very interesting candidate. He ran as a socially liberal fiscal conservative candidate. And I think in the Midwest in particular, you cannot underestimate how such a candidate could do well here, because there is an independent spirit here in this region. Obviously, I'm not in Minnesota, I'm in Illinois, but still Midwesterners have this kind of independent spirit about them. I don't know. It really depends on the type of independent who could run for the governorship and whether they can gain some traction. I know Ventura was able to capitalize on winning by plurality, something that we've talked about happening in other states.
True.
He was able to do that. So, I do think with Walz, there's all these fraud stuff happening. I think he's facing a lot of political pressure right now just to get out. And I think he's looking ahead and seeing that it's going to be relentless for him up into an election, and it's just going to hurt him going into a primary and going into a general election.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that a little bit yesterday, Chad, about how his whole election, basically, there's this big scandal going on in Minnesota right now where allegedly $9 billion was stolen by various groups in Minnesota in the American Rescue Plan and COVID pandemic relief funds. They were basically, all these people were taking this money and saying that they were providing meal assistance to children. And it turns out that they weren't. And, the right is spinning this scandal one way and the left is, looking at it a different way. But there are some pretty damning facts in this case. I think that probably, Chad, there was COVID fraud or COVID relief money fraud literally everywhere. So that's maybe a subject for another episode. But what do you think, Chad? Do you think it's like, or Sean, do you think it's political? Do you think it's legit? What do you think?
I think we make everything political, right? And you're going to have the right side's going to say, okay, they're going to take all the instances of fraud and say, this is everything, right? They were all doing this and blah, blah, blah. And then the left's going to say, well, look at all these people that were using it right and doing the right thing, right? And those fraudsters, right? That it's pretty inescapable that there's a level of fraud going on that there's either either the folks in power that should be entrusted to make sure to keep things accountable weren't doing their job, and there's really not an excuse at some point, right? You can claim you were unaware to some extent, but I mean, we're talking about a state. What is their budget? Like $13 billion. This is not a financially large state. $9 billion of fraud in a state that has a total budget of $13 billion. I mean, I think has a lot to do with why Tim Walz is not running for re-election.
Right.
Well,
But
oh,
go ahead, Sean. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, and the investigation into this fraud case goes back to the Biden administration. His DOJ was looking
Mhm.
into this as well. So we know there is legitimacy to the 9 billion case. And I think what's come up recently with the daycares, focusing specifically on the Somali run daycares, that one is a little bit more shady in terms of the evidence behind it. However, it has raised the issue again of this ongoing fraud happening in Minnesota, whether it has to do with the daycares, whether it has to do with child assistance programs. And that continues to hound Tim Walz as governor, because at the end of the day, he is at the head of the executive branch there. It all falls on him. And so if there are these issues of oversight with the government in order to keep these instances or keep people from being able to take advantage of the system, then that ultimately falls on his shoulders, and it becomes hard for him to keep going if he's going to continue to be hounded by these accusations of fraud, regardless of whether they're coming from Republicans or Democrats or other.
Well, I mean, but also there's the whole like Somali screen to it, right? So there was a huge percentage of the money involves the Somali community, and so you have people on the right who are sort of really emphasizing that aspect of it, which is incredibly divisive. But then on the left, you have people who are saying like anyone who's bringing up that they're Somali, or that those are white supremacists, right? Or that those people are racist. So you've got this race thing going on, and it's just all of it is going to divide and divide and divide, and none of it is going to heal our politics at all. It's just yet another wedge issue. And now you have like a really prominent member of the Democratic establishment who can't even run for reelection. Like, it's extraordinary. Like, politicians do not give up power willingly. That's very rare. I mean, although I did find one instance of where it happened in the early 1980s in Minnesota, where a governor, a one-term governor, did give up power, but it's pretty rare for a politician to
And
give up power.
There's a guy in Venezuela, I think, that they had to actually were just go and pick him out from a helicopter and to get him out of power, right?
Hopefully that doesn't happen to any governors anytime soon.
That's an interesting issue. Well, like, I don't know if you guys saw the tweet from Fetterman.
No.
Basically he said, look, it was our Democratic administration that put the $25 million bounty on Maduro. Why are we all attacking the Trump administration? Because he accomplished what we said needed to be done, right? Which that's a very interesting, because you have a lot of folks, and even on folks on the right, you have the more libertarian non-interventionists saying, what are we doing going in, taking out, leaders of other countries, right? And then you get into the debate, well, is he a leader or is he a dictator? Because, the international community generally recognized that he didn't actually win the election, right? So there's another interesting issue that has really divided the right and the left, but there's some places where you have the Fettermans on the left that are going, come on, guys, like, we're the ones that put a bounty out there to remove him. And then on the right side, you have, those more libertarian leaning folks who are being critical of their own side for just being interventionists.
Right. There's definitely you can have two opinions at the same time, though, right? You can believe that Maduro should have been taken out. You can support the military's, extraordinary effort to do that, and extraordinarily successful effort to do that without anybody being killed on our side. But you can be happy that there's no longer a dictator. But then you can also be pretty concerned that Congress wasn't involved. Congress didn't even get informed until after it even started, and that it definitely goes against the tendencies of a lot of people in Trump's base, that they're non-interventionists.
I was researching for the video that I made the other day, where I was contrasting Bush's extraction of Noriega with Trump's extraction of Maduro, and it was interesting in the press conference that Bush held afterwards. He talked about how he formed a bipartisan coalition in Congress before they actually sent in the military to take out Noriega. And it's just interesting to me how from Trump, you don't even hear a semblance of doing anything like that. He just kind of just bypassed it completely. which is just, it's a completely alternative way of doing it. Do you guys think that that's something that's necessary when we undertake these kind of operations?
I'm happy to play. I always play devil's advocate, right? In his perspective, Bush came from a different time, right? I mean, one of the posts that you did was great when you talked about you showed that debate clip between Reagan and Bush Senior on their in immigration. What a different debate it was, right?
Right.
But we live in this where everybody's rushing to get something that they can put out there and say, I have exclusive information. And then, so I can go viral online and everything, which didn't exist back then, right? The sensitivities are so much greater. And so in the Trump administration defense, I mean, how much stuff got leaked? I mean, when did you ever see something get leaked from the Supreme Court of the United States, right? That was only a few years ago when we got stuff getting leaked out of there. And, if I'm saying, we can't risk, this is all got to be on a need to know basis, because we're going to go and we're going to do this. This is a serious operation. We don't want to end up in a situation like where we got American lives on the ground and being killed. And so we're going to go in there, swoop them out. And unlike a lot of other situations, we're not going to leave American troops in Venezuela. There's not American troops there right now. And arguably this is not regime change. In fact, the regime's vice president is now in a leadership position, right? So in the devil's advocate position, I think those are the conversations we have to have. I'm not saying that's the right position, but those are the conversations. Say, okay, I disagree with that, but I kind of understand it, right? Where I see like our debate now starts from the premise that there's ill motive on the other side, not that we just simply disagree, that we disagree because of the motive.
And you're saying that the access to information that people have now
is so different. And then what you can do with that information to get it out there in such a speed is so different than back then.
That's a really good point. That's the speed of it, because, I mean, historically, for sure, we can trust the senators who were and the Congress people who were on the Intelligence Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee to keep operational information secret and private, and and not to endanger our armed services. I mean, that usually go to the Gang of Eight, it's called, and talk to them about it beforehand. And he did not do that in this case until after everything was launched. And so that was, that's different. Right. And but what you're talking about, Chad, is really interesting. It's also different, the speed with which, if somebody was going to leak, the speed that they could leak it with is where we are in a really different time in terms of that. But thousands and thousands of people did know that this was going to happen. Our whole military, we have a flotilla in the Caribbean and the Pacific right now. So.
I mean, that's the one thing that's inarguable. It was a successful mission, right? From the standpoint of just operationally, pretty incredible, right?
Almost unprecedented, I believe. Yeah.
In and out, the guy's egging on the Trump. 8 hours later, he's in handcuffs on the plane. So, on some level, I hope
and
people
also,
on both sides.
It was also it's so predictable that, of course, everybody's going to try to divide it into, yes or no, good decision, bad decision, extrapolate. Everything always all becomes political, so that you have, in some cases now, Democrats sort of looking like they support Maduro.
Right.
Staying in power. That's crazy.
I mean, and if you look at the polling on Latin American countries, it ain't close, right? Costa Rica, I think it's a plus 80% of people who support what the United States did. In Venezuela,
just look at the Venezuelans.
In Venezuela, it's plus 40, right? You ask the folks down there in Latin America who are right down there, it's not even close. Right? Yeah. They all support what the United States did. So it's a very interesting situation.
And of course, this is one of those situations where it's a wait and see type thing, right? Because like you said, Chad, the regime hasn't changed there. It's still Maduro's people who are in charge. He's still got the same agents that are in every state office there. So only time will tell if the administration here has an impact on how that government handles itself going forward, and whether they change as a result of, Trump saying, hey, if I want to, I can go in and extract the vice president too, if I want to. or worse.
He's saying
he
that
said,
pretty.
or
Right.
worse.
He said that.
Yeah.
Well, as Rubio said, if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah.
Right.
I think this leads us well into another kind of topic adjacent to this, which is, we've seen political figures in the past kind of use military events and operations to kind of allow them to do things under the radar. While the news is distracted by this big Venezuela success, Trump's been able to do stuff like change the mail rules, like we were talking about before, and stuff like that. So what do you guys have you noticed anything specifically going on these last couple days that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I would say
Cara.
with the USPS thing, it's a very interesting case where I first heard about it from TikTok. I didn't hear it from a major news outlet. I had heard about from citizens just looking deeper into this. And that's what we kind of saw with the Nick Shirley thing, citizens taking upon themselves to kind of uncover this stuff. And so what the USPS did, while everyone was distracted with Epstein and Venezuela and over the holiday break where people aren't really paying attention to politics, is they changed the rule so that anything that's mailed through the USPS system doesn't get postmarked when it gets in the mail. It gets postmarked when it reaches a processing center. So there is a delay there. It could be a day, it could be a few days, depending on where you are. So, it's one of those things where anything that's time sensitive, like voting, a lot of people focus on voting, but when it comes to paying your bills or your taxes, all this is affected by a delay in the process of getting those things postmarked on a date.
So like normally I go to my post office, I take my taxes or I take my ballot or whatever it is. And when I put it in the slot, it gets postmarked that day. If I'm there by 5 o'clock, it's guaranteed to be postmarked that day, which has huge implications for ballots, for taxes, for bills, just like Sean was saying. And so what they're saying now is basically, we don't have enough money anymore at the United States Postal Service to have a postmark reflect the date that a piece of mail was dropped off or deposited at a local post office. This is like extraordinary, you guys. I can't believe, I just still can't even believe it.
And of course, a lot of people are focusing on the vote by mail aspect to this because Trump has come out against mail-in voting across the board. And, this is going to affect a lot of people come election time. A third of voters in 2024 cast their ballot by mail. In California, you're talking 75% of voters vote by mail. In some states like Colorado and Washington, it's a universal vote by mail system, which means most, if not all voters vote by mail. So now they have to be aware that they cannot just cast their ballot on election day or maybe the day or two before election day. They have to, these states have to do due diligence to educate voters that if you're going to vote by mail, do it well ahead in advance.
And you can't count on it. Like, you're not going to get like something that where you just know. And so for sure, Democrats vote more by mail than Republicans. For sure, the president, does not like vote by mail, much to the chagrin of any Republican operative who understands like how important it is to getting the vote out. But also, like, younger voters are way more likely to vote by mail than older voters. And so all these young people and all these people are basically all at risk now of having their ballots get rejected because they're quote unquote late because of this strange, arbitrary budget change at the post office.
As Chad would say, like, to play devil's advocate, but maybe on the opposite side, to a lot of people, I think this feels like pushing the limits of what the federal government can do when you have control of the federal apparatus to limit the state's ability to hold mail-in voting, right? Because if you're Trump and you're them, you're not saying, well, I can't force the states to change their rules around mail-in voting, but what I can do is change the rules around the apparatus that they use to facilitate that to make it more difficult for their voters to use that system.
Yeah. And by the way,
that's
Ethan,
the strategy here, right?
Well, maybe. And Congress can absolutely provide additional funding to the United States Postal Service anytime it wants. And Congress could also basically require that election mail get postmarked on the day that it's received at a local post office. So there's definitely things that Congress could do if they had the will to do it. In any case, I really think, and Chad, I don't know what you would think about this, or Sean or Ethan, we have to have, if this is going to happen, then we have to have more of those ballot drop boxes at cities and towns and clerks' offices in cities, so that you can avoid the post office altogether and just go drop your ballot off at the town hall. And you know that you did that on the day of the election or sometime before, and you got it there in time, and we don't have to mess with the post office at all in that case.
Can I just be the contrarian, play devil's advocate like always?
Of course.
You vote. It's one time every 2 years. I don't understand, right? We have mail-in. I get it, of saying, okay, we can have early voting and do all that stuff. Great. We have all that stuff. But to say we have to make things so easy that we have to put boxes out there that are without security and without knowing who's doing that, right? But I'm saying, you understand, there's a reason why people can be suspicious of these things.
Right.
Like, why can't we have at least some level of, okay, if you're going to be able to mail in ballot, like, go drop it off or put it in your mailbox within a week of the election, or at the worst, you can always go drop it off at the registrar of voters or something like that. Like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate, saying, okay, come on. It's an important thing we do, that's voting. And do we not diminish it by making it, like, oh, we have to make it so easy that you can just wake up and,
And I think right now what we are seeing is a moment where voters are a little skeptical of the process.
A little?
A lot.
They're
very much
right?
skeptical of the process. And so, like, in a state like California, where it was legal in 2020 for the Republican Party to put out their own ballot boxes for people to drop off their ballots, because ballot harvesting is legal in California, where people can collect other people's ballots and turn it in for them. That does create a level of suspicion from people on the other side, from just voters in general.
That's my point. Let's be real. I mean, yes, there's whether it's valid or not. I mean, we legalized ballot harvesting in California. Like, we legalized.
Honestly, I didn't know what that was.
We've allowed political operatives basically to go to apartment complexes and collect people's ballots. Oh, nobody would ever collect a ballot and just tell them how they should fill it out or do any of that stuff. Nobody would ever do that, because it's voting and it's sacred, right? There's just a lot of people that don't believe that hanky-panky doesn't go on, right?
Well, and look, you've got the United States Postal Service now basically saying that you can't mail a letter on the day that you mailed a letter. Mm-hmm. So if that's not hanky-panky, I don't know what is. Like, that's crazy.
Another thing to note about it is the only coverage on that story was from PBS and like a few local news stations.
And IBN.
IBN now. Yeah, of course. Just, it's interesting how that what seems like a big deal is really, it doesn't get the attention these days.
It really shows how much news outlets focus particular stories based on what they think is going to get clicks, what they think is going to get views. So you see people focus on the Epstein files and Venezuela and Greenland and these stories, because that's what they think is going to get views. And so what then, like, people like me, the first place I saw this story was TikTok. It wasn't on NPR, even though I know NPR is one of the few legacy media outlets that covered this story, or a local news network. It was on social media. It was from citizens putting in the work, because they know that the media isn't going to look deeper into this, because they'd rather focus on the gotcha stories. They'd rather focus on the clickbait and all of that. So yeah,
totally. Speaking of NPR, do you know the Corporation for Public Broadcasting voted they're shutting down?
Yep.
So, ciao to public media. NPR is still, I guess, going strong. So that leads us into another discussion about voting, which is California's voter ID ballot initiative. I think that you reported, Sean, that they've collected over 1 million signatures so far to put that thing on the ballot in November 26 in California.
Yeah, so that was Carl DeMile's goal with Reform California, the organization that is spearheading and running the voter ID initiative there in California, was to get to 1 million by December 31st, to kind of send a message to state officials that they can do this and that they will have the signatures to put it on the ballot. And so now DeMaio says that they are going to try to get another 200,000 signatures by the first week of February to turn the petitions in a month before the actual state deadline. So this will give them room to kind of prepare for any type of procedural or legal challenge by state officials if it happens. And you know what? It is possible. Democrats, we haven't seen a lot of coverage of it, but it seems like Democrats have been mostly silent on this in California. But, just like we saw with Missouri there and their procedural stalling of the veto referendum against the gerrymander there, we could very well see Democrats do the same thing in California with this voter ID initiative.
So is it really just a partisan measure, that voter ID thing? Because I know that basically a lot of times the parties will use issues, like try to get initiatives on the ballot in order to juice turnout because, you're trying to give people something to vote for because like maybe the candidates aren't as exciting or they're not as passionate about the candidates as they might be about an issue like voter ID, or like abortion rights, for example. Like the Democrats will put an abortion protection initiative on the ballot to try to juice the Dem turnout. And it looks like in this case, maybe Republicans trying to put a voter ID thing on the ballot. And gosh, isn't voter ID like super popular?
Yeah, I think there's truth to both sides of that, right? Like, say what you want about Carl DeMaio. I live in San Diego. I'm familiar with Carl DeMaio since he was on the San Diego City Council, right? Say what you want about him, he's not stupid, right? And what's interesting about the way Carl DeMaio did not write it as like you can. Just like any issue with voter ID, you could write it in a way that is really aggressive and really would be suppressive and everything. Carl DeMaio took his time. He wrote a credible voter ID thing that's pretty tough to say, oh, this is just a radical, way to do it. This is an 80-20 issue, right? Mm-hmm. It's like 99% with Republicans, but there's still, with independents and Democrats, it's still a winning issue. So I think he accomplishes both, right? Where it's a turnout play for his own side, but he's taken up an issue that the Democratic Party themselves are afraid they don't want to take it on, right? But Democratic Party voters are actually like, it kind of makes sense. So, I think this is a really, really interesting issue. And it's really interesting how this is going to resolve in California. But nobody knows better than Cara McCormick what the state can do to frustrate an initiative effort, a citizens' initiative effort.
Totally. And, speaking about voter ID in particular, in Maine, we had voter ID on the ballot in November of 2024, just this past November, and it lost. Okay, so you got an 80-20 issue that lost. Why did it lose? Because the Secretary of State, who's a partisan Democrat, wrote the ballot language to say that the measure would take away 2 days of absentee voting. 2 days of early voting or something like that, right? So the whole campaign was not about like, let's have voter ID. The whole campaign was about let's save absentee voting, vote no. Save absentee voting, vote no. So they flipped the issue from something that would be widely sort of popular into something that that failed. So
look what they did in California on Prop 50, right? They basically, said voting yes to allow the Democratic Party to gerrymander was to save democracy, right? And like the way they worded it, if you didn't know any better and you just read it, it's like, it sounds like you're saving democracy by voting yes, right? Because they have the power to write the ballot language and they can, the other side can file all the lawsuits and stuff they want. But when you control the apparatus, they can kind of do whatever they want.
I think this will all come down to how the parties play this. And in my piece, I noted that if the Republicans can focus on what unites voters with regards to voter ID rather than what divides the parties, then they could lead on what is a nonpartisan issue. When you look at research, The parties like to say that this is election security versus voter suppression, that we need voter ID to enhance our election security, versus the Democratic leaders who say that's going to lead to voter suppression. But research shows that both sides are wrong on that, that it doesn't really do anything when it comes to election security, because the type of fraud, voter impersonation, is so rare that statistically, rather, it might as well not exist. And then it doesn't really have an impact on turnout where we see voter ID in place. At least there's no meaningful evidence that it does. Now, these studies do look at, likely voters. They don't look at the low propensity voters that often. But as far as the research goes, this becomes more about perception. It's just, does it make voters feel a little bit better about the process itself? And I think that ultimately is what unites voters, is that they don't see an issue. They don't see a problem with people having to show a photo ID when they go to vote. That seems such a small thing to ask for a lot of voters. And if the Republicans can vote or focus on that rather than, make it about, being anti, Democratic or or try to bolster the campaigns, then I think they could lead on what is a nonpartisan issue.
I mean, that's sort of like at Independent Voter and Independent Voter News, what we really try to do, right? We say, like, okay, here's a set of facts. Here's how the right is going to spin this. Here's how the left is going to spin this. You're like, okay, make your own decision, but just do realize that everything is being kind of spun to serve one side or the other. And no wonder that we're so completely polarized as a country, right? Like, this is what's killing the country, guys, is that these issues where it's sort of common sense and broad support get completely manipulated and completely turned into things that like drive wedges and divisions into our world. And it doesn't have to be this way. But if we keep having this first past the post system, this is what we have to look forward to for as long as I live, as long as my kids live, as long as my grandkids,
The way you get elected incentivizes this behavior, but it's just, it's sad because it's governance. It's also life, right? Like any decision that's made, you can put, here's the reasons not to make that decision on the left side of the chalkboard, and here's the reasons to make that decision on the right side of the chalkboard. That's the reality with every decision made in your own life and in government. But we've created a system where we say, unless you're willing to just say all the things on the left side of the chalkboard, right, and not give credit to anything on the right side of the chalkboard, you can't be one of us and one of us in our party, and we're going to abandon you, right? And that's really just a closed-mindedness, is say, hey, look, yeah, we're gonna just tell everybody that there's really only one right answer because there's no credible arguments on the other side. And that's just not the case. It's not life.
And as we're seeing the growth of independent voters in the United States, we're seeing just how much nuance there is in how people view the world around them. And so like Gallup had come out with that 2024 poll that showed that voter ID was an 80-20 issue. That same poll found that 60% of voters also believe that every voter should be mailed a ballot. So and while Republicans don't like that idea and Democrats don't like voter ID, when you look at what the American people want, they like the idea of easier access to elections. They like the idea of anything that it can at least be perceived as making elections a bit more secure, that doesn't really require a lot from voters, like showing a photo ID at the polls, right? There's more nuance here than the parties would have you believe, because, as you said, Chad, the system that we have in place.
We still have a couple more things that we want to talk about. One is that
Sorry, Lena.
Sorry, Lena. So the New York Post is sort of a conservative outlet, I would say, is definitely reporting a lot about Gavin Newsom having his own state auditor give him many failing grades. And I also covered this week in Independent Voter News the huge vacancies in California prisons in the areas of healthcare. There's 3 or 4 prisons in California where they've got 30 to 50% vacancy rates. These are people like for positions like psychologists, psychiatrists. And so the healthcare system and you've got these massive budgets, you have all this money, but the money's not being used properly. And I guess, it's not just Tim Walz, right? There's got to be this waste is everywhere.
Right. And I think this is a fundamental thing about with all the fraud stuff that's coming up and everything, right? You have the one side that's taken this, the kind of the Doge angle and everything, and like the populists, hey, look, there's just fraud. Let's just go and obliterate all these programs, right? But the reality is it's not that these things shouldn't exist. What fraud does is makes really good programs unsustainable and makes them not be able to be effective, right?
And
I think
also that it allows people who oppose social service programs and
correct
and big government, right? It allows them to say,
to point out
burn it all down.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's and then like if you look at it, you look in Cara's story though, and you look under the numbers. I mean, these are people getting paid $300,000, but then you go and you ask yourself, well, I'm a psychiatrist or like I have all these credentials and I could probably go make almost that much money, like treating normal people. Am I going to go and in the middle of nowhere have to deal with just some of the most difficult people in the, and in dangerous situations, right?
I think it's more the danger. They're still like normal. They're still all normal people. They're just incarcerated, right? And so
I think the question is if you asked a normal person who should get paid more, the psychiatrist that talks to people inside of a prison or outside of a prison, they'll probably say, well, the person inside the prison should have to get paid more, right? Because
right. And they are, but it's still hard to fill those positions, right? Because you're talking people, jail. They don't have prisons and jails like in right next to where most of these physicians and doctors live, right? So they also have to travel. They have to be in a dangerous environment. They have to, right? They have to do all this stuff, and right, it's a real problem. I don't have the solution. I'm just throwing out problems.
I don't have the solution either, but money obviously isn't what's going to solve it 100% either. You have to figure out other ways to incentivize people, and obviously, if people are getting proper healthcare, proper mental health care, then it makes the environment for the people who do work in the prisons a lot safer, easier, better. We have to protect those people.
Right. Well, remember we did a whole How It Really Works series on correctional officers and inside the prisons and stuff. And it's like we have these partisan debates, that are so superficial about, we should, we got this privatized prison system and this and that. And it's like you go humanize it and then go say, okay, well, there's got to be a place for prisons. And then think about the people that have to wake up every day. They have to go there and manage it and deal with the personalities and the potential for violence and all this kind of stuff every day of their life and the toll it takes on them. And they don't get paid a whole lot of money, right? It's just going and stepping back. If we could in the political discussions, just maybe talk about the reality of situations a little more than just these silly talking points, I think we would get a lot farther policy wise and get a lot more agreement amongst each other.
There's all these people who show up every single day for one another all across this country, whether they work for the U.S. Post Office or they work for the, the correctional industry or whatever it is. Like all these people supporting other people, supporting our society. And like, just think about the military, like all the people who are in the military now who were wondering, are we going to war in Venezuela? Like just, it's like the politics sometimes forgets the people.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I really just did want to say I want to tell everybody out there who's listening that Alaska is going to try to get rid of open primaries and ranked choice voting again.
Yeah. Was this the third time?
The third time.
Yeah, I imagine that they're going to keep trying until they're successful. So I know.
Well,
I mean, the reality is they're going to try to do it in California too. I mean, we've had nonpartisan primaries and, people can look at California and go, well, look, it's still a Democrat dominated state. But, the national discussion in California is much different. When you look on a state level, the composition of the legislature, the nonpartisan primary has improved the discussion and the ability for legislators to have their own opinions, but they're going to go after it.
But
They're
like,
gonna go
okay,
after it.
Alaska, 60% of the registered voters in Alaska are nonpartisan. They're unaffiliated with the party. They deserve to have a system where they can vote. They have a system. They voted to have that system. Then they
Right.
voted. Then they tried to get rid of it. And the people said, no, we want to keep it. And now it's like a third time. Like, is it going to be 3 strikes or is it going to be?
I think for them though, they're relying on the fact that these elections have been very close for the top 4 and RCV measure. They've been just above 50%. And so if they can just get a election where turnout is low enough, right, that they can get repeal passed, I think that's what they're counting on.
I just cannot believe like the lengths that people will go to take away something that is so much better.
What do
And
you
it's
mean
such
you
a-
can't believe, Cara? You lived that for what, like 10 years? How many
Yeah.
times? How many times did you have to pass ranked choice voting or prevent them from trying to undo ranked choice voting in Maine?
A lot of
Yeah, right.
times, you know, but
Yeah.
that's it. Basically, I'm really sorry for the people who oppose it, but every time you oppose something that the people want, that makes the people want it more. When
Right.
you know, what doesn't kill you definitely does make you stronger. And in Maine, it just, every time they came after us, every time they tried to, you know, to thwart the people's will at the
Mhm.
ballot box, people who didn't even like ranked choice voting started to support us. You know,
Mhm.
because what they didn't like was the government and the politicians and the people who think that they know better trying to engineer things to take away the will of the people.
Right.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you know, it really doesn't work for independents. It really doesn't work for people who are already soured against the political system. It really doesn't work to try to take those people and give them less power.
Well, certainly it robs them of their equal voting rights, but it also doesn't help a political system where, like in Alaska, we've seen a transformation there of all these cross-partisan coalitions forming as a result of nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting being used there. So it does a disservice, but it does help, you know, the partisan and special interest groups that previously benefited from the closed system there. That's what this is about. It's about regaining that power over the system.
Totally.
Right.
And that's what it's going to be about in California if they try to move forward with anything there. That's what it, you know, if they continue to try to stop ranked choice voting from happening in all these states. You know, it's been banned all these places. You know, they're just trying to hold on to their power. So the more they resist, the more obvious it is how much we need it.
That's how it really works.
Nice, nice. Ethan.
Good
Well,
close.
yeah. No, I think we're running up on time. Sean, Cara, Happy New Year. Good to
Happy
see you
New
again.
Year.
For all of you listening, thank you for joining in. As always, visit us on ivn.us. Join the discussion on Instagram or Facebook by following Independent Voter. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. And
Yeah.
welcome to 2026, everybody. It's going to be fun.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me on.
That was great. Great to have you on, Ethan. We love it.
Oh, yeah.
We love it.
Yeah, the soothsayer in the back. We're going to get a camera on you. So.
Okay.
Absolutely.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.